Right now, without thinking about it, you know roughly what time it is. You've checked your phone, or a clock on the wall, or the corner of your laptop screen. Modern humans look at a clock an average of 96 times a day. We do it so automatically we don't notice we're doing it. But for almost all of human history, no one had a clock. There were no minutes. There were no seconds. The number on the wall that tells you it's 3:47 p.m. didn't exist as a concept, not just as a device, but as an idea. For 300,000 years, every single one of your ancestors lived an entire life without ever once asking what time it was. So how did they know? How did they wake up, meet each other, work together, plan a journey, prepare a meal? How did civilizations function for thousands of years without anyone agreeing on what hour it was? The answer isn't what you'd expect, because ancient humans weren't telling time the way you do. They were doing something we've completely forgotten how to do. Let's start with the most obvious source: the sun. For most of human history, the sun was the only clock that mattered. But it wasn't a clock the way we think of one. It didn't divide the day into equal pieces. It just was the day. Sunrise meant beginning. Noon meant the highest point. Sunset meant ending. Anything finer than that came from watching shadows. The earliest known sundial dates from roughly 1500 BCE in ancient Egypt, a simple stone block with a raised arm that cast a shadow across marked notches. But the Egyptians had an interesting problem. They divided daylight into 12 parts, regardless of season. In summer, when the day was long, each hour stretched to about 75 minutes. In winter, when daylight shrank, each hour shortened to about 45 minutes. An hour wasn't a fixed unit. It was a fraction of however much sunlight you happened to have that day. This system, called temporal hours or unequal hours, was used across the Greek and Roman world and survived in Europe for over 2,000 years. A meeting at the third hour in July was not the same length as a meeting at the third hour in December. Nobody minded. The hour was whatever the sun decided it was. But the sun wasn't enough on its own. Cloudy days existed. Nighttime existed. And as soon as humans started living in groups larger than a few hundred people, they needed something more. That's where bells came in. In medieval Europe, the most reliable timekeeper wasn't a sundial. It was a monk. The Christian monasteries that spread across Europe between the 6th and 12th centuries operated on a strict prayer schedule called the Liturgy of the Hours. 7 times a day, plus once at night, the monks rang bells to call themselves to prayer. Matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, compline. The bells weren't just for the monks. They rang loudly enough to be heard for miles, and every village within earshot organized its day around them. Historian Jacques Le Goff called this church time, a way of life in which the hour was something you heard, not something you read. A peasant working a field in 13th century France didn't check the time. The bell told him. When it rang, he stopped. When it rang again, he started. He had no clock, no watch, no number in his head. He lived inside the sound of the bell. And the bell's authority went beyond prayer. Markets opened at the bell. Courts convened at the bell. Curfew began at the bell. The English word clock comes from the medieval Latin clocca, which simply meant bell. Before clocks measured time, bells announced it. But there's something stranger underneath all this, and historians only fully appreciated it in the last century, because ancient and medieval humans weren't just using different tools to measure time. They were measuring something different. In 1967, the historian E. P. Thompson published a paper in the journal Past and Present called Time, Work Discipline, and Industrial Capitalism. Thompson had spent years studying records from English villages in the 17th and 18th centuries. Letters, diaries, work agreements. What he found upended a basic assumption about human history. Before the Industrial Revolution, most people did not measure time by hours. They measured it by tasks. A field took one plowing. A pot of stew took one stewing. A walk to the next village took one pipe of tobacco. An egg boiled in the time it took to say 3 Hail Marys. Maestro Martino, the Italian cook, whose recipes appeared in the first printed cookbook in Europe in 1474, instructed his readers to boil things for as long as it takes to say 2 Lord's Prayers or 3 Hail Marys. Everyone knew the prayers, so everyone knew the time. Thompson called this task orientation. Time wasn't an external grid you fit your activities into. It was the activity itself. You didn't work for 8 hours. You worked until the work was done. You didn't sleep for 6 hours. You slept until you woke up. The question, how long did that take, would have made no sense to most people throughout history. It took as long as it took. That was the whole answer. To a medieval farmer, the question, what time is it, had no meaningful answer. It was morning, or it was after the bell, or the bread was almost ready. Time was tangled into the things happening in the world, not separated from them. So what changed? When did humans stop living inside time and start checking it? The answer is one specific invention. Around the year 1300, somewhere in Northern Europe, historians still argue about exactly where, someone built the first mechanical clock. It used a weight and an escapement, a small toothed wheel that released energy in regular ticks. For the first time in human history, time was being measured by something that had nothing to do with the sun, the seasons, the body, or the bell. The clock didn't care if it was summer or winter. It didn't slow down on cloudy days. It just ticked. Steadily, forever, each tick the same length as the last. Within 200 years, mechanical clocks were on every cathedral and town hall in Europe. And something happened that nobody had predicted. The clock began to dictate the day instead of describing it. Workers were paid by the hour. Shops opened at fixed times. Meetings began at agreed numbers. The clock didn't just tell people when something was happening. It told them when something should happen. In 1370, King Charles V of France commissioned a mechanical clock for the Palais de la Cité in Paris, built by a Lorraine clockmaker named Henri de Vic. Within a generation, churches across Paris were synchronizing their bells to it. The sun no longer set the hour. The machine did. And we never went back. We don't know what time it is anymore. Not really. We know what the clock says. The number on your phone is not connected to anything in the natural world. Your ancestors knew time in their bodies, the height of the sun, the length of the shadow, the hunger between meals, the bell in the distance, the weight of fatigue at the end of a task. You know time by checking a screen. When you wake up at 7 a.m. and feel exhausted, that's because 7 a.m. is a number, not a moment. Your body doesn't recognize it. Your circadian rhythm responds to light, not to the digit on your alarm. When you eat lunch at noon because it's lunchtime, you're not eating because you're hungry. You're eating because the clock told you to. When the workday ends at 5 p.m. and you keep working anyway, you're overriding a signal you can't even feel anymore. For 300,000 years, your ancestors never asked what time it was, because they already knew. The sun was on their face. The bell was in their ears. The work was in their hands. Time wasn't something you measured. It was something you lived inside. We invented a machine that could keep time better than the sun, and we forgot how to feel it.